Halloween is right around the corner, and there are classics you're practically bound to watch. You've got your Elm Street movies, your Great Pumpkins, your Hocus Pocus. But I want to shed a jack-o'-lantern light on a handful of Halloween treats that are maybe stuck at the bottom of the bowl. Some movies, cartoons, and specials that I feel should be just as big as Pinhead, Jason, and Jack Skellington. I can't promise they'll be totally unheard of, but ones I notice don't get the same rep. Here are my top 10 overlooked Halloween treats. The best way I can describe Life After Beth is that more than just any Aubrey Plaza vehicle, it feels like what would happen if you gave April Ludgate the reins of a horror comedy, in which Plaza plays patient zero of a zombie plague shortly after her death. If it seems like I'm zeroed in on Plaza a lot, it's because she's of course what sells this movie. I can't think of anyone else who can capture the spontaneous animalism of a zombie, but one that's still in touch with her human inclination and wants her boyfriend and to chill out with some smooth jazz. Because as someone who is also a choleric monster until he gets a chance to enjoy some jazz, this resonated hard with me. So if you're like me, and you're into the relatively narrow subgenre of Aubrey Plaza and Anna Kendrick vehicles and want to see it tackle horror, check this one out. Ed, Edd n Eddy's later seasons are a bit polarizing as far as I can tell, but transitioning the show's characteristic summer days vibe to the start of a kid's school year in a more autumnal tone was a risk I always loved that they took, allowing for a new, warmer color palette, new capacity for stories to tell with these characters, and of course, a Halloween special. Ed, Edd n Eddy's Boo Ha Ha. A rather brilliant premise sees Ed watching too many monster movies shortly before trick-or-treating, frying his brain and causing him to hallucinate everyone the boys come across is the monster they mean to masquerade as. I'd long pegged the art of Ed, Edd n Eddy as more characteristic than really breathtaking in its quality, per se. The distinctly genre visions Ed experiences allow for the departments of art and animation to really pull out all the stops, allowing for some genuinely beautiful looking pieces that don't feel out of place in this show's distinct world. Blend that with the Ed's trademark slapstick and character-driven storytelling, and this was an instant Halloween classic for me as a kid. Pumpkinhead may look like if a xenomorph was carved out of autumn gourds, but make no mistake, this stop-motion spirit of vengeance is nothing to be trifled with. A revenge-seeking monster summoned by a grieving father who dispatches the beast to take vengeance on the hooligans responsible for the accident that killed his son. Pumpkinhead isn't any silent, monstrous slasher, but one with a distinct feel of an almost righteous indignation in mind. Spiritually connected to his summoner, giving an interesting take on how invincible the traditional slasher is, in that any damage he sustains is also sustained by his spiritual benefactor. Think JoJo Stands. It creates this great atmospheric blend of farmland horror and eldritch mysticism that works to build something really memorable. Some horror aficionados may scoff at me calling Pumpkinhead overlooked, as he does have quite the cult following and even a couple sequels to his Allspice name, but you don't see him among Jason and Leatherface these days. Let's let him join the haunted tea party more often. Here's kind of a strange one, a 30-minute TV special that aired in 1978 on NBC that only really developed sort of a cult following recently, Witches' Night Out. It's a bizarre and rather corny special, but all the best seasonal programming is, and this one has a colorful, rather 70s flavor that builds an ample appeal. It's really weird to see a half-hour special with a clear cast of characters and rules to sort of a world, but it looks to me like this universe, if you will, was never used again outside of a Christmas short that preceded it a few years earlier, called The Gift of Winter, which is, well, it's interesting. Someone behind this short is super proud of it, though. There's a running Twitter that plugs the short and makes new drawings and stuff involving these characters to this day. And I think that's rather neat. Maybe because of all that, I'm a little more fascinated with what a pop culture anomaly it is than I really am in love with the short itself, but it's cute, fun, and disco-y enough to be worth a watch. Crispin Glover claimed to take many of the commercial jobs he did to fund his own highly artistic independent work, and thank heavens he did, otherwise we may have never gotten Willard, in which Glover plays the titular social outcast who finds company and potential vengeance in a slew of rats. The tone here is one I love that's hard to put into words, but that slightly dingy turn-of-the-century horror feeling lends itself really well to the literal rat race Willard Styles has to endure. Glover himself is one of my favorite actors for the strangest of characters, and I'd put this up there with George McFly and the Thin Man from Charlie's Angels among my favorite weirdos he's helped put to screen. This movie gets as skin-crawly and creepy as a premise like a mob of rats gets. I'm not sure there's any other angle to sell it from. Are the rats not good enough for you? You don't like the rats? Gans is a manga series with some esteem and maybe a little more ill repute for its downright miserable content and story. I'm not super well versed in it, but from what I've seen, it's some of the hardest stuff to watch out there just for the harshness of the world. But if you don't feel like you can endure a whole series that heavy, but maybe just a taste, then I happily would recommend the film adaptation of the first arc, Gans Zero. I see some turned up noses at this one, and I really can't imagine why. The CGI is totally stunning, bringing the intricate and terrifying designs thought up by Hiroya Oku to disturbing life. Although the monsters in Dread are very much in the spooky spirit, it's the battles and bloodied triumphs that lead to the piece feeling much like an action movie, blending the two love genres in a way few could perfect. With all the dread and gore of a slasher, but the hopeful beacons and signs of light that are perfectly suited to a long-running manga and anime. And I think that's kind of an interesting blend to take a look at. Kinda like Pumpkinhead, this movie isn't unheard of and had its time in the limelight, but it's really falling out of the graces of the community in recent years. I refer to Maniac Cop, which is a slasher about exactly what it sounds like. The design of the wicked Officer Cordell is awesome and one of my favorite looks for a movie killer. Broad shoulders, a scarred up face, and a portentous handling of his billy club that sticks in my mind so prominently. Fear of corruption coming from law enforcement is a very real thing, and I'd be remiss not to acknowledge that perhaps the use of it in an ungrounded slasher could be in poor taste, especially in recent years. But for a product of the 80s, this movie doesn't keep its lips zipped on matters that feel relevant today. It has some excellent set pieces, it's exceedingly well directed, and it deserves to wear the badge of a slasher classic. In the wide-spanning table of eloquent dishes like psychological thrillers and classic slashers, The Babysitter is junk food, make no mistake, but a very fun and welcome instance, the story of a young man falling in love with his high school-aged babysitter only to find out the friends she has over after bedtime are members of a satanic cult. From there, the film is Home Alone meets Friday the 13th, as our lead has to dispatch these demonic pubescents one by one, in creative backyard gore fests that would make Kevin McAllister blush. And it's this gauntlet of killer teens that really makes the movie. I love the weirdly shirtless and predatory jock with all the honor of some anime rival. I love how weird and off-the-wall Bella Thorne and King Batch are as the more comedic end of their faction, and I love Haname Lee as the morbid and calculating Sonia. Cover me in sauce and call me Simp Cocktail. Samara Weaving may just be the new killer queen, if you will, of horror, which might be even more apparent even further up this list. Dirty Pair is an underloved gem of an OVA from way back in the glory days of beautiful 80s anime ladies kicking ass in outer space. I'd happily recommend the whole package, but it's episodic enough that if you want something different this time of year, you can single-handedly check out episode 2 of the OVA, No Need for a Halloween Party. On Halloween night, a whole slew of criminal platoons use the nature of the holiday to take their debauchery in disguise. And it's only in the devil-may-care nature of old-school anime that you see such fun and blatant references. And that's not even to mention that the dirty pair along the way has to chase a Terminator skeleton through a city during the big Halloween celebration. I love this show. It's just really fun, vaporwave colored adventures to kill half an hour with. This is not the first time I've talked about Ready or Not, and if I have anything to say about it, it won't be the last. Ready or Not is all about a woman who marries into an affluent family, who built their empire making and selling games, or so it would seem, before it turns out their wealth comes from a pact with the devil, kept valid by blood sacrifice which a new bride would be subject to. A lot of the same appeal of The Babysitter applies here, but despite still being pretty funny, there's an extremely macabre atmosphere, despite the fact that I laughed here and there, because of how committed the performances are. This is a very cruel movie that had me on the edge of my seat. Though what really sells this film are the wicked family who act as the villains of the piece, who are united in their goal of retaining their family tradition, but have dynamics and complexes that really keep a viewer guessing, from the depressive alcoholic Daniel to frantic pill-popping Emily. Despite being a mob of slashers, the family's contradicting characteristics carry things in a way that's insanely fun. You'd think this would be hard to cram into just 90 minutes, along with great atmosphere and world building, a likable lead, once again played by Samara Weaving, and some extremely memorable set pieces, but it pulls it all off beautifully. It was my movie of the year in 2019, and still the most fun I've had watching a scary movie in theaters. This is far and away my pick for an overlooked spooky season delight. Well, friends, if you're watching this and it was uploaded before Halloween, then I have completed my kind of bonkers gauntlet of planned Halloween videos, putting out one spooky themed video every Thursday of October, all 5. So I hope you enjoyed this little dive with me, because honestly, it had me burnt out a little bit, as fun as it was. But I'm very, very proud to be here at the finish line of it all, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and stay tuned for whatever projects I've got coming next, and have a spooky, safe, and happy Halloween.